Hello, grade 4 students. This is Miss Fatin and welcome to a new science lecture video. We are still speaking or learning about plants. Plants are living organisms, so for sure they reproduce. What do I mean by reproduction? Reproduction is the process of creating or recreating something, a new living thing, such as a baby. And in the plant's case, or in the flowering plant's case, it is the seed. How do flowering plants reproduce? The flower is the part that helps the plant to make its babies, its seeds. And all the parts of a flower are engaged in the reproduction process. Let me start with the petals. Petals are colorful. They have a beautiful smell to attract pollinators, while sepals look like leaves and their job is to protect the growing flower. So when the flower is still a bud, is still young, the sepals protect it. We have in the middle the girl standing, the female part that consists of a stigma, a style, and the ovary. Inside the ovary, you can clearly see the ovules. These three parts together build the pistil or the carpel of the flower. So the pistil or the carpel is the female part. The anther with the filament make the stamen, which is the male part. The job of the anther is to produce pollen grains. The job of the stigma is to receive pollen grains. Now, what will move pollen grains from the anther to the stigma? It's a pollinator for sure, such as a bee. A bee is a pollinator. The job of the pollinator is to move or transfer a pollen grain from the anther to the stigma. This process is called pollination. So pollination occurs when a pollen grain is transferred from the male anther to the female stigma. And it happens by a pollinator. The bee in this case, in our case, is the pollinator. Other examples of pollinators are butterflies, birds, bats. The wind is also a pollinator. This is the pollen grain landing on the stigma. The pollen grain then moves down through the style and meets an ovule. When a pollen grain meets an ovule, a seed is formed. And in good conditions, the seed will be planted in the soil. The seed will grow into a seedling. The seedling will grow into an adult, a big plant. The plant will grow flowers, and then the flowers will make seeds, and the cycle starts all over again. The wind is a pollinator, as I just mentioned. The wind actually pollinates or helps in pollinating conifers. So the trees that you can see right here, look at the screen, this tree, and this tree are called conifers. So scientists noticed that these trees get pollinated by wind. So in our case right here, the pollinator is the wind. The wind takes pollen from the male part to the female part. But let me tell you something. These trees are not flowering. They do not grow flowers. There is no anther to make the pollen. There is no stigma to receive the pollen. Think with me. How do conifers release pollen? Where do seeds grow if there is no ovary, if there is no stamen, if there is no pistil? Let's see. So today's lesson is about conifers, yes. What's a conifer? A conifer is a tree, and it's a tree that stays green all year round. So it never loses its green color. For this reason, we call it evergreen. Evergreen means it stays green forever. So a conifer is a tree that stays green. It is an evergreen tree. This tree does not have normal leaves. Look at the leaves of this tree. Okay, I will draw more arrows to the leaves. So this is a leaf, this is another leaf, and this is a leaf. The leaves of this plant, of this tree, are needle-like leaves. And as I said, they are not flowering. Instead of growing flowers, they grow cones. They grow cones. So this is a cone. This is a cone. Okay? Let me repeat. A conifer is an evergreen tree that has needle-like leaves and that grows cones instead of growing flowers. There are two types of cones, male cones and female cones. As in the flowering plants, the male parts are the ones that produce pollen. So right here, the pollen cones are the male cones, and they are the cones that release pollen, while the seed cones are the female cones that hold the baby. Here is a closer picture to the male cone and to the female cone. This is the female cone. The female cone holds the babies, holds the seeds. And the seeds are pollinated, or the ovules found in the seed cones are pollinated by the wind. Who brings the pollen? It's the wind. The wind brings the pollen from the male cones, from the pollen cones to the female cones. Can you identify the male cones and the female cones? Yes, the smaller ones, the smaller ones are the male cones, and they are also called pollen cones. Why? Because they are the cones that release pollen. They are the cones that make pollen. While the female cones, these are the female cones, are the cones that hold the seeds. We also call them seed cones. Which cones do you think must be bigger, larger in size? The male cones or the female cones? It's for sure the female cone. The female cone must be larger than the male cone because it is the cone that will hold the babies in the inside. So the female cones are larger. They are bigger than the male cones. There are lots of examples of conifers. What's a conifer? It is a tree, an evergreen tree that has needles, needle-like leaves, and that grows cones instead of growing flowers. What are different examples of conifers? The spruce tree, the cypress tree, the pine tree, the cedar tree, the giant sequoia, for example, redwood trees. All of these are examples of conifers, okay? A pine tree is an example of conifers, right? This means that the pine tree is evergreen. It grows needle-like leaves, and it grows cones instead of growing flowers. Other examples other than the pine trees: cedar trees, cypress trees, pine trees, giant sequoia, redwood trees are all examples of conifers. There are two types of cones: pollen cones or male cones. So I will highlight them in blue. The pollen cones are the male cones that make pollen. The female cones, which are the seed cones, they have the ovules inside. The wind will take pollen from the male cone to the female cone. And as you can see, and as we said before, the male cone is smaller in size than the male cone is smaller than the female cone. And look, there are lots of shapes, colors, and sizes of cones, okay? It depends on the type of the tree, okay? I hope all is clear. If you still have any questions, I'm always available. Take care and bye-bye, grade 4.